Present Katie Dugan.
Present Chris Peich.
And all the videos we watch.
Corey Evans here.
Ralph Dormitzer here.
Francine Lyons here.
Susan Franklin here. Okay. All right, so thanks for the materials, Katie, very helpful. I think we should probably talk about some of the open items first before we get into seeing how they all fit.
Sure.
Are there some layup items though? Things that we could just simply say, we're going to do it because they're pretty well discussed and there's no controversy. Couldn't we do it, some of those right away and get a start?
So we could do it that way, but what we were hoping to do, or what we discussed doing, Ralph, was, remember, in prior years, we would talk about different requests and then we would vote a slate, rather than have to do every single one individually.
What you know what we could do, Susan?
We could
Do you want to
it
just
that way where we go through the more straightforward ones and go ahead and vote them and then move to the more complicated ones?
do you want to go through by department? And we could start like with here, let me just share my screen here. We can start with this is the most recent with all the updated numbers, right, Michelle?
It's the one that's online.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Katie. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The FY26 TV. Yeah, so why don't, I mean, my recommendation would be, we've got basically, let's just do,
Corey, can
We
you
can
use
do this.
Across?
yeah, of course. Let's make big, more big.
Yeah.
And let's do view. Sorry, I've got this 38-inch screen, so for me it's
Even
big.
more
but for-
big. Like
We will. Here you go. That good?
I need a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's
I don't
fine.
know who's with
Might
me.
struggle if you don't have to.
Hang in there, Katie, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm okay. That's better. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great.
Well then here,
um,
let me make this column a little smaller, and then we can go 200, 225.
I'm plus 500 in both eyes, so you gotta, yeah.
There you go. I fixed it. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Hold on. Come on, online office. Let's be better here.
Oh, that's mean.
Okay. Technology notwithstanding, here we are. Okay. Everyone good on this?
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
perfect.
Okay, make it
Yeah.
a little bigger too that way. Okay. So I think we can. I accidentally deleted that. There you go. I would say let's just move it by department. So we can make a motion to recommend the DPW requests of F-350 number, blah, 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 number, blah, 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 number, blah, 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 number. And then we just vote the slate for that department. Right now, if you look at this sheet, if we take all the requests that we have on this sheet, we have a total request amount of 2,012,000. So we are under what our kind of target ceiling is of 2.1 million.
Mhm.
This number includes stuff that comes out of the stabilization funds.
Yeah.
So, we ignore this number, but for our purposes, if we were to approve everything that we've gone through and kind of vetted at this point, we would be within our budget. So we can, I think what I would say is if there's stuff here that we still have really still base level follow-ups to do, we can punt it. But other than that, there's no worry that we would approve too much money because this list fits right now in what we have.
I think the only question, Corey, I would raise is any unknowns to hit us between now and, let's say 4 weeks from now, anything changing. So I'd be more inclined to say, make sure we know that there's nothing going to change, for example, whatever the DPW wants. And I think it can be reasonably assumed there's nothing there. But you have to go down each
Fair.
one of these and say, are there any likely changes to occur? And that's what I would suggest to you. So.
Oh, well, let's do it by department. To your point, Ralph, earlier, let's just knock them out and we can just scroll down and that way we don't have to scroll back up.
Sounds good.
I mean,
All right. So
can
go
we
ahead,
just
Katie.
pause for 1 second on
Sure.
the unknowns? Because Michelle's the one that's going to know if there's there's a rumor of a whammy coming that's out of left field.
Yeah.
No whammies for DPW.
Okay, I'll add a column,
whammy,
whammies,
any
yes or no.
whammy,
All right, then, and is this our request? Is this the right number for the roads and sidewalks transfer, Michelle? Or is it just the 800?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that because we've gone back and forth on whether it's 800 or the 1.3, so
Okay, we're gonna hold on that then. All right.
hold that and I would just do the individual items.
Okay, then
And
I
let-
will make a go ahead.
And that's also out of the roads and sidewalks stabilization, so we're sort of talking general, we're talking capital stabilization appropriations, really.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we can just skip the, well, yeah, but we
do usually.
do have to vote on those. Yeah,
Yeah.
we just need a number though. Yeah.
Yeah. And what Brian had said to us, Michelle, is that the 1.3 was without the town sort of premium pricing. So he expected that number to come down from 1.3 to 1.1. But that's still 800,000 plus chapter 90 plus whatever funds he has from utilities. So
Mhm.
the number, what is the number that we vote?
Yep,
Do you-
let me get back with him on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
But we have no questions about roads. Roads are getting paved, so we can, right?
Correct.
All right, then let's start our votorama. I will move that we approve the DPW requests as shown, including $111,095 for the F-350 utility body truck, $170,000 for the F-600 dump body truck, $69,079 for the garage service lift, and $58,973 for the John Deere utility tractor.
For a total of 409,147.
Is that what you did by highlight? Yep, for a total of 409,147.
I will second.
All in favor?
Corey Evans, aye.
We'll say no.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Katie?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Katie Dugan, aye. In my
Susan?
mind, I said
Franklin,
aye.
And Ralph, for the record, we won't record it, but we'll remember it.
Just for the sake of saying it, yeah, mine's an aye, right?
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, so, and then for facilities, I will move that we approve $40,000 for the Paul Pratt Library structural masonry repairs.
I'll second.
Okay, Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Katie,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye.
And for the record, Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Awesome. 5-0 plus 1. All right, that's there. On the ambulance, I personally don't have any further follow-ups on this. I did really appreciate the back and forth we've had. I also have a sneaking suspicion that this number, we may be revisiting this, especially with the current tariff situation and whatnot. This, I expect this number will probably change and we'll have to revote it anyway, or, rethink the plan. So, but at this time, I don't have any issues with this. So I would move it, but I also wanted to give the committee, anyone else, time to have thoughts before we're in a motion.
Yeah, if I could have the floor for a little bit, Corey, on this one.
Please.
Okay. A couple of things I would refer you to. One is I would refer you to the 25-page spec, which I think has gone up on the
Yep.
website, and also to the 2021 procurement, which was really the same thing as this, but with a great deal more detail. With regard to the spec itself, there are several things which, if you read it closely, will make you ask, shouldn't we ask the fire chief some very significant questions? Let me give you a list of what struck me about this 25-page document, which has been checked off 100% for every possible option. To start with, it is going to be an F550. You might ask why not a F450, which is what we bought in the past, but I see little difference between the 450 and the 550, so I don't have any problem with that. It's a little bit more money, but that's not a problem. However, the option they checked off was for a 19,500 pound upgrade from 12,550 pounds capacity for the truck. Now, when you read further down, you'll see that that upgrade was done because what was checked off was a trailer tow package, option 68, with a high capacity option of $535. So there's a tow package. We have never bought a tow package on an ambulance, but we don't know what the cost is because the chief has not provided a cost, nor has the spec sheet shown a cost for that. But both things, between the upgrade from 12,750 total gross pounds of capacity to 19,500 pounds, is not, in my view, although the chief may have a different view on this, is not justified specifically where it shouldn't be. We don't know why we would have a tow package, particularly a high capacity tow package for this truck. It is never going to be towing anything as far as I know. That's number one. There's real money involved in that. So it not only is an upgrade in the strength of the truck, there's an upgrade in the actual tow capacity of the truck. Okay, the next one, which is really odd too.
Ralph, just
Yeah.
out of curiosity, the payload upgrade in terms of the poundage, do you know as a reference point what was done in 2021?
I tried to look for it, Katie. I could not find it. Unfortunately, I did look. All I could look at was what was the actual typical payload. And when you read about the 450 and the 550, what you realize that extra capacity payload is really for someone that's going to be dumping, hauling sand, towing vehicles, that sort of thing. It does not seem even slightly appropriate for this truck, but I don't know. I have never seen a tow package on our current ambulances, although I certainly don't inspect them closely for that. But I certainly have seen enough of the ambulance. If it's got a tow package, I'd be very surprised. So I'm surprised at that, number one. The next one is it's got a dump fixed feature. So this one has a dump feature. Now that's another checkoff. Now, why did we opt for a dump truck? I'm not aware that we've ever dumped anything off of an ambulance. So that's another one. The other one that you should be aware of is that we will be replacing or taking one of the two Stryker ambulance cot automated lifts, which I think are absolutely valuable, but we're buying a third one. Now, the oldest one we've got was bought in 2016, and the newest one was bought in 2021. According to what was said by Bob Sylvia back in 2021, and is written, if you want to go back and look at it, he said they would have at least a 12-year life and could be longer if necessary by maintenance. It is not typical to actually change out a Stryker cot device because it's not attached in any way to the ambulance. It's simply a separate device. There are fixtures inside the ambulance to which it attaches, but that has nothing to do with buying one. But anyway, the cost of that is another $80,000, and now we'll have three of them. And I don't know what we'd ever do with three of them, okay? It does not make a great deal of sense. If I were doing it, I suggest asking, why aren't we moving the one on the current operating number one ambulance and moving that one, which is only 4 years old and will be only 6 or 7 years old when we actually get the new ambulance? And why aren't we moving that to the new ambulance, as it will only have about 6 or 7 years on it, and it has a minimum of 12 years of life? So there are really some serious questions about this whole cost here. and the fact that none of it is enumerated anywhere until we actually asked, I asked Michelle to actually get some of this enumerated so we could find out what were all these things done. So anyway, broadly, I do not think you should go forward with 502 until you understand why these extras were added. They do not seem necessary, and they certainly are costly. And why do we need another striker cot or lift device if in fact we've got two of them already, both of which are quite relatively new? So anyway, those are the questions in that. So it's more than
Ralph-
what we said. Yeah. Right.
Ralph, do you know, you've enumerated the tow package, the increase in payload and the dump features, but do you have a cost for what those three incremental?
What I did is I asked Michelle if she could get me the actually breakdown of the costs on that spec sheet.
Mhm.
And what I got back was basically a single one-line statement from Chief Dockery. It is what it is. 80. It is what it is at 502,000. No attempt to actually give any information. I mean, really not transparent in the slightest. So it really, I look at it, and the reason why I'm so concerned about this is so much higher in cost than the one that was done in 2021. And we were not told this included an extra 80,000 for the striker, although you could find it if you looked for it. And you certainly weren't talked about the extra things that they've added here. So anyway.
But we don't, but Ralph, you don't know, you've identified these three areas of discrepancy, but you don't know for sure that that's making up a big or small number relative to the increase, correct?
I have no idea what the numbers are, but because we don't know what they are, it seems to me we ought to know. That's all.
Okay, well, so
So,
I'm just trying to point out that we don't know whether these added $5,000 of cost or $100,000
He
of
won't
cost.
answer the question directly. That's the problem.
okay, can I
So I
give me a few minutes here, please? So this is my world. This is the world that I exist in, is automotive and this kind of stuff. So when I read these things, I see the matrix. I don't see line items, right? So the high capacity, so this spec sheet is not necessarily one that, when it comes to the actual chassis of the vehicle, right, Chief Dockery is buying the Superliner Type 1 ambulance. And that's kind of as far as he goes. When it comes to the specification of what the chassis has, that is dictated by the person who's putting it together. Like, you buy an RV, the choice of what the chassis comes with is the decision of the RV maker. And the gross vehicle weight rating has to do with how much weight that entire build out of the ambulance body, including, mechanical stuff, including lifts, including oxygen tanks, including people, requires. And there's, this is all DOT regulated, numbers about what this thing can do. As part of getting to that gross vehicle weight of 19,500 pounds, you have to add the Payload Plus package, which requires the addition of the high capacity trailer tow package, right? So it's just part of a package deal. So if you buy a, heavy duty, or heavier weight range package, it comes with a bunch of stuff. But notably, it comes with heavier duty springs, axles, sway bars, bearings. It could come with heavier brake lines. It could come with heavier duty alternators. It's not just that he bought a tow package. It's that the Payload Plus package included the tow package. And in this case, it may not be a tow, maybe nothing except for a heavier duty rear suspension. If you're towing something, you need to have more suspension in the rear. This is a thing with a giant box on it. And so having the additional capacity over the rear axle may just be required by the people that are putting this together. I don't build ambulances. I have no idea what an ambulance requires. I speak the language of the chassis body and what that means to me, but I can't second guess what the ambulance supplier is specifying for their ambulance. If we want to go back to Chief Dockery and say, could we buy a lighter duty ambulance? Is there a less expensive option? Because it looks like this is kind of more of a top of the line option, which again, I'm not against necessarily, but if we're looking for cost savings, we'd be looking at an ambulance that doesn't have the same level of equipment. And we'd be asking what level of equipment, what level of service does this get us versus what level of service are we comfortable with? Is this an upgrade in what we're able to in the field versus is it just a replacement of what we have now? But the individual things about the tow package, that's not something, those things are all, it is what it is kind of correct, but it's not in the realm of what we can specify. It's probably not in the realm of something that we can even change. Because if you want to put an ambulance, if you want to have the ambulance company put an ambulance body and build us an ambulance, they're going to say this is the platform that we use. So that's just the industry background on that front. I hope that kind of addresses why it's the way it is. I myself am not, I don't necessarily want to get into how heavy, an ambulance needs to be, but if that's, I'm inclined to defer to Chief Dockery about what he needs for equipment. If he says he needs a Starliner, maybe we need a Starliner. But outside of that, I don't think I don't think we know enough to get into kind of the specifics I would expect.
I feel, it doesn't change the question, why, okay? You just, I understand all you said, Corey. It does not change the basic question, why? This is not like the current ambulance or like the previous ambulance. This is different. So the question is why? Why? So the answer is he has to come back and say, he has to be more transparent about this. Just go look at what was said in 2021 and look what was said in the material we got in 2025. And you will be quite shocked at the differences between, you'll see what was informative and what is not informative. This one is not informative. And you had to go digging even to find this all out, right? So the question is why? And all of those arguments are valid. Maybe it's required by some new regulation, but who knows, right? But certainly we should not be actually giving out our approval on things where in fact the questions remain. And I think the point of all of this is we have an obligation to ask the questions when it stands out so obviously. So particularly the money, that 502,000. I mean, that's a lot of dough. And it's
Michelle,
twice-
sorry, Ralph. I thought you were done. My apologies.
twice.
So I just messaged with Chief Dockery and I pointed out the concerns line by line. And he's gonna call me tomorrow. We're gonna go line by line and we're gonna contact the dealer together to figure
right.
out what the line level pricing is, if there is any. And then I'll be able to get back to you.
That's terrific. That is terrific.
But your overarching question, Ralph, is this a upgrade from what we bought in 2021? Because your perception is that it's a significant upgrade
Yeah,
in
the
terms of
reason
like the actual underlying specs.
Yeah, the reason I think so is it was clear that was, and if you look at what in fact Bob Sylvia wrote, he said it was a 450. That's a slightly lighter truck. It's not a lot lighter. It's a small amount lighter. You can look online and find what that is. So we bought a 450, or I think we bought a 450, because that's what we actually have on the 2021 spec sheet. So clearly it was lighter. So the question is, was it with a tow package, without a tow package? Why not? Okay, so this it just stands out here. That's all. That's, and I'm asking myself, if you're looking at 502,000, you subtract 80,000, it's 421, and that compares to something like 244, some number like that, 244,000, which is what we paid for the F450 back in 2021. So there are really huge differences here. Even if you take the striker part out, the differences are huge. So
Yeah, Ralph, he had mentioned that the striker was 80,000 of the total cost. But
That's right.
I agree with you. I mean, it's not, we have time to, have him address the questions. So why don't we just dock that one until we get the response to the
And I
questions
guess-
that you've asked.
Okay, just on the striker, obviously the 2021 one was bought as part of the new ambulance. So like that came as a package, no,
No, it didn't. It was separately
We
identified.
added it later.
No, it added later. Yeah. Right.
you added it later. So the F450 that we bought in 2021 did not come with the striker, even though we have a
Okay.
striker lift from 2021.
They don't come with a striker. The only part that striker requires is that there be a rail inside of the van itself, so that the striker cot can slide in, and it also has to have an outlet to actually charge up the striker. That's all. They're not tied together in any way.
I understand, but like the ambulance that we bought in 2021,
Mhm.
we also separately bought a striker and combined them into a new ambulance plus a new striker in 2021.
Yes, we bought two. We bought
Yeah,
each.
so Katie, if you go back historically, we used to not have strikers at all. It was
Right,
really
they
when
were lifting
the
people
assisted
up.
living facility came along and they were doing a lot more ambulance,
Mhm.
deploying a lot more
Transports.
ambulances
Yeah.
there. And we had a couple of firemen who ended up with some back injuries. That's
Yep.
when we started buying the strikers.
Okay, so I understand it's a powered lift. I'm not sure why we would necessarily take what is gonna be a 10-year-old striker from 2016 and repurpose it when it's got a 12-year life. You keep on saying we're gonna have 3 strikers, but we're gonna have by the time that this vehicle arrives in 3 years, that 2016 striker is gonna be 13 years old, past its useful life.
Well, I don't.
And I assume we want 2 ambulances, both with strikers, because of the need to eliminate.
Well, I don't think I've not seen anything like that says a 12-year useful life. That's a truck useful life, not a
Okay,
striker.
Yeah,
useful
I
life.
mean,
Yeah.
it's a pretty simple piece of machinery.
Yeah.
I guess, but
I
the
just think we
argument
should
that you're
get
making,
the
the
questions
argument
that
that
we
you're
have.
making is to repurpose a 13-year-old piece of equipment.
I don't think we're making an argument, we're just bringing up a point.
Okay,
But more importantly, I just looked up, why would you get a higher payload for an ambulance? And it says to accommodate a larger amount of equipment, supplies, et cetera, patients, particularly for large-scale emergencies when you're transporting a large number of patients. So, that makes me think a little bit like maybe we're getting something a little more than we need.
So the one we have now
So let's
is a F550. So it is this. It is.
Well, it was bought as an F450. I don't know what they actually bought. It was bought if you look at what the 2021 request was, it was F450.
Yeah, no, I pulled up the stock of what I went. Sorry, that's why I was checked out, and it's the actual one that we paid for is an F550, and that was 245 655 back in 2021. So that's what we had. I mean, so for the size ambulance, I'm looking at the spec sheet now of this website too. They come in different body lengths, and this is the 171, which is the longest one they offered. I think it's a reasonable assumption that if you're doing the longest ambulance, you need the heaviest chassis. Like if you went to the 450, you'd probably have to do the 152 to 158. So we're definitely buying the biggest, nicest one they have. I think that's kind of the point here.
I'm just looking at the Stryker Pro stretchers have a service life of 7 years under normal use. So perhaps the question to Chief Dockery is, what is the useful life on the Stryker lift? Because if we have a 2016 and a 2021, as I said, we're gonna have a 13-year-old power lift when this new ambulance finally arrives in Cohasset.
Well, again, as this ambulance isn't even going to be built and delivered for a number of years, we may be able to just get the striker later. But I still think there's valid questions, and the chief has offered to answer them, so I think we should take him up on that offer and
Yep.
make sure we are all comfortable before we vote this one.
Yep. I just want to make sure that we're asking the questions in a way that we're going to get answers back so that we're able to like take a vote next
Yep.
week. That's all I'm asking, Susan, is that this is like our final, hopefully, bite at the apple.
Yep, I think it will be. I think
Okay.
that the questions are clear about the payload. The question about the dump package actually has nothing to do with dump like we think of dump. It has to do with lowering the height of the ambulance using some kind of air system.
For maintenance.
Lowering the air suspension.
for loading
Safe height
loading
for
patients in.
and unloading.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is definitely like you know, all the options type of vehicle, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
seems like this is the nicest thing they have. So, you know, and that's a luxury which we may or may not decide we want. So. All right, so we will flag that for Chief. Katie, who wants to take the lead on kind of repackaging exactly what we're asking? Because I think we should give Chief Dockeray a really clean set of what we're expecting him to give us information on.
So,
Michelle?
so Corey, I've got that, and I'm gonna make a call with him in the morning to the manufacturer, so we'll get the answers.
Okay. And would you mind just also taking a look at the 2021 and if it's at all possible to give us a, you know, 2-channel comparison, right?
Sure. Yep.
What's an upgrade versus what just got more expensive? I think that
Yep.
would make it clean for us to understand
Mhm.
if we're actually doing upgrades or this is just how the market is. So,
Yep. I got it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
all right. So that drops us to the IT requests with both the access points and the public safety, the antenna work. I'm guessing these two we probably want to, I don't know if anyone wants to split these up into two. If we think one is, they're kind of different projects. I'm happy to move both at the same time, but I leave it up to the rest of the committee to see if you want to vote them together or if you want to split one off to talk about that separately.
Maybe, again, I hate to interject here, but at least worth talking about the, not the access point switches. I do think there is no question those are priced about right. It's a pretty expensive software package, as you may know, but it doesn't seem out of the question. But when you get to the switches themselves, okay, we're going from 24 point to 48 point switches, as I understand it, although I'm not
Correct.
sure what this one
Okay.
is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, this is part, some of the switches are 48 ports that are in the schools. They're going from 24 to 48, correct?
Okay, so we're really limiting that to the schools, and actually when you go out to, let's say, the police department, the town hall, or maybe any other spot that we're putting them, we're not going to put in 48 port switches. Is that correct?
Those are not, yeah, so per Ron's email, the switch replacements are, access points are town-wide, the switch upgrades are schools.
Okay. Now, the reason I ask about that is, I don't know if you've ever done the math on this, but we now have 11 switches of 24 ports, right? The total capacity of all of these means we have 264 ports throughout the entire network. Of those, about 166, which represent the Wi-Fi access points, are used, and there may be a few more used. And that's not the whole story, but that would normally leave something in the order of 90 or 95 unused ports, even now. Okay, there may be some additional ports that are used for things like printers and other things, but not much. So the real question is, and I'm not going to fight it, I'm only going to point out that 48 ports, and Corey, you know what I think about this, adds, if in fact you're really going to load them up, adds congestion and reduces speed. It is not an advantageous thing to do. But anyway, I'm not arguing it. I'm just pointing out we're going to come up with an awful lot of ports. We're going to come up with something like 264 twice, which is something around 520 ports. I can't even imagine what we're going to ever do with 520 ports. But anyway, that's what we're getting.
Yeah, and so if every port is loaded up with, you know, maximum throughput, then yeah, you get a congestion. But that doesn't happen in networking, right? If one of those is a camera, it's taken, you know, again, you know, 10 kilobits per second. I mean, it's minor. If you're doing a printer, it's barely talking. You know, so again, we're not running a data center, right? So there's two things. One, it's unlikely that we'd ever max out a 48 a switch, regardless if it's 24 or 48. But also, these are also, 10 gigabit between them. So we're also leveling up by 10, kind of the throughput between switches. So I don't. And our cost difference between 24 and 48 was, I mean, I think Katie said it was like 10%.
It's
Right,
10,000.
so-
It was around
Yeah.
10,000.
And it's like, if we ever have to, what sucks is, and I've been in this situation, right, working in Knox, is like, you have 3 more things to add, and you got to add a whole nother switch, right? And so to me, it's just, if we're talking about the devices that we've been talking about, which we need ports for, it just makes sense to add them. And if we were building like a science lab and we were doing like a lot of data stuff, that'd be one thing. But since these are, again, cameras, Wi-Fi access points, and they're serving, kids with computers taking tests, or they're serving printers, I think the convenience factor gets us where we need to go. That's just kind of my technical read on this. So, all right. So I will move it then, to say that we approve. We motion to approve $224,438 for the townwide access point replacement and the switch upgrade as proposed.
I'll second.
Oh,
Sorry, Corey Evans, aye.
Aye, Katie Dugan.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll abstain, I think, on this one. Right.
Who's there?
Oh,
I'm
he's-
sorry, I went to mute. I'm an I. I
I'm
apologize.
sorry,
Yep.
Susan Franklin, I.
All right, so I'll just do 5-0. I won't do the plus or minus 1. Okay.
Right.
Public safety tower. I don't have any more questions about its use, or kind of what we're doing with it. So I also understand that we're getting a lot of cost savings here because we're going to be using someone else's labor. So I see the benefits of moving forward with this now. So I would, unless there's objections, I would make a motion to recommend the $54,000 for the public safety line of sight communications network project.
Again, if you don't mind my commenting, has anyone talked with the residents around or looking at Sandy Beach? And do they know there's going to be a tower put in on the parking lot at Sandy Beach to house a microwave relay? Do they know that? Who has looked at this? Who knows?
I thought it was going to go on the bathhouse,
On the
right?
building, yeah.
Yeah.
They're mounting a dish,
The
which is
tower is gonna
18
be
to
in
24
the-
inches at Sandy Beach
Right. Who?
On the building.
on the building.
Who has asked anyone there whether they approve of that? That does not belong to the town.
Yeah, it is in a town building.
That is an organization, a nonprofit organization that owns that and has the control of it.
Have you, Ralph? Have we got a no from them?
I
Is there
didn't know,
okay.
I didn't know it was going on that building. If I had known that, I would have reached out to them. I didn't know that. I do know how
All
to,
right.
I do know how to reach out to the people on that one. They need to.
I mean,
know. Yeah.
I was just assuming that they were looped in just because that's kind of the normal course of order because they've been there. Michelle, is my assumption accurate, or are we running into what Ralph pointed out, which is we're doing something without the permission of the property owner? It looks like Michelle tapped out for a second. That's a big question. I was assuming everyone was on the same page about it, Ralph. So that's why I asked if you knew something different.
Yeah, I'd asked this in the beginning. I said, where's it going and who knows about it, right? But I didn't
Okay.
get an answer back, right?
Oh, here's Michelle. Michelle's back. Did you hear my question, Michelle?
Sorry, I didn't. I had to let the dog out. Sorry.
Sorry, the question was just, do we have the green light to go ahead since the receiving side of this is going to be placed on Sandy Beach's bathhouse? Have we received permission from them, considering it's their bathhouse, to move forward with this project?
I can't answer that question. I know there's been some discussions. I don't know if there's been final approvals.
Okay, and if we don't have that approval, then does the antenna make any sense?
It doesn't make sense to be placed on the bathhouse, however, I think Ron had cited another area that he could put it if necessary. Um,
Do we get because Chief talked about, and if anyone remembers this, please remind me. Chief talked about being able to use our, the emergency communications network. Was
Yeah.
that something that is relied on pinging off the bathhouse? I was under the impression that just because of where that antenna is, the antenna itself would allow us to do some stuff there.
Correct. Yes, so, the wheelwright tower is the most crucial.
Okay, and the Sandy Beach is a nice to have.
Yes. I believe this would just improve, radio
I thought we
communications.
were gonna bounce the frequency from BlackRock to Sandy to the tower. Did I misunderstand that?
I think that was just for internet access and Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah, the tower initially on Forest Ave, okay, is really for the Wi-Fi communication. And then Ron thought that for an inexpensive addition, he could put up a microwave link there. That's what it was about. In
Yep.
order to make that useful, he would have to have something, if in fact you wanted to have it, you'd have to have something also at Sandy Beach somewhere. And the assumption was that the wireless, the wired systems, that is the wireless systems on the police radios, could somehow take advantage of that. I never got clear on that because their radios are not impeded the way Wi-Fi is anyway. So it isn't clear at all that this in fact is the right thing to do without more discussion or maybe approval by the people on whose property this would go. So.
But just
on
the
the quote,
component of it,
it's-
Ralph,
Pardon me?
correct? The statement you just made it sound like the whole project was,
It's questionable. Yeah, I'm
But-
not sure
but-
why. I'm not sure why a microwave link. I know that what the chief said, the police chief said to us was that, well, they do have a frequency on their radios that would actually take advantage of this, but I'm not quite sure. Are they actually going to be line of sight to this somehow? Microwave is line of sight. So what else is going on that tower? It can't just be a dish. It has to be something more. So this is very unclear in my mind as to what this is all about. In other words, you go from the tower on Forest Ave to the tower on Sandy Beach, but that's not sufficient. There has to be some kind of additional broadcast system associated with it. So this is really not so simple. And do the radios accommodate that? I don't know. And don't the radios, even now, don't the radios, not Wi-Fi, but the radios they use, the wireless radios they use, don't they communicate whether you're at Sandy Beach or West Corner? I know they do. So,
I just pulled up the quote again. We were all misremembering. So it says in the quote that the Sandy Beach antenna will need to be located on a telephone pole. And that wouldn't have the same problem and conduit installed to building or overhead line. So it just needs power. Yeah, okay.
yeah, the poles, as you know, are on the west side of Atlantic Ave there. So it would have to be over there.
Right.
I don't know. You'd have to get permission to be on that pole, any of those poles.
Yeah, that'd be a permission out from Sandy Beach though. All right, so let's bounce this one back to just double check that we have all receiver side, Sandy Beach side permissions squared away. Is that fair?
Yeah, and functionality, really. I think you've got to be clear. Why are we doing this, right? So.
but I'm just sort of stepping back, big picture. The request came in both from Chief Quigley and from Ron Menard.
Right.
So those two departments felt like this was important in terms of their overall ability to communicate at Rocky and at Sandy.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, they're not building this just for fun. I mean, they
No,
made a pretty good case. Yeah.
Yeah, but remember, guys, the reason why, in fact, the problem is both at West Corner and at Sandy Beach is a Wi-Fi problem. It is not a wireless communication problem. That is not line of sight and does not need to have line of sight.
We should confirm that because I mean, I'm recalling this a little
Yeah.
differently. I thought that Chief was pretty clear that they have issues accessing the communication system they use when they're downtown. So maybe their radios work or whatever, but
Maybe
I mean, he was pretty clear about that.
No, that's
I know
my,
it has to do
that
with
was my impression
on-
too.
It may be true, guys, but if you've got a radio in your boat, as I do, and go anywhere, I get communication which is wireless. I don't know why theirs is less capability than my simple little radio system, my
Well,
wireless radio system, right? Why is it different?
Well, they've got I mean, they've got computers inside the cars now where they're running stuff. There's data back and forth. They're communicating where they are. It's not just, pick up the thing and call, Officer, Stevens or whatever. It's, this is the communications network, as I remember the conversation, involves a lot of information for where equipment is, who's where, those sorts of things. So in emergency responses, those are all coordinated through kind of the central hub network. It's not
Yeah.
just guys on radios.
Oh, I agree with that, but those are not Wi-Fi. Those are not Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, they may be some. I think I forget what he said, but there's a different acronym he used for that communications radio system. It may be a totally different thing, but he said that it was like during like the road race by the sea or during the Tri, they've had communications where people that are there lose connection to the main system. That was something that I recalled from that conversation. So, I mean, from Chief was pretty clear about the operational challenges that this would solve. That's kind of where I don't want to say stop listening, but that's kind of as far as I, row my canoe when it comes to capital. Is if this is something that Chief is telling us that it's going to help him in fulfill his responsibilities to doing something, I'm kind of okay with that, unless, to your point, unless it's a $500,000 request where we've got some other things. This seems like it's a pretty straightforward project.
So just what I have in my notes is that it's a public safety dedicated frequency aimed at addressing dead zones near the beach areas, is what I wrote down. So that's the goal.
Yeah, mobile MB. Yeah, it says this will be used for communication during events, incidents, and other first responder use, while allowing mobile MBT units to sync to SS, REC, and other CPD resources while remote. Other hybrid build-outs will be forthcoming in future submittals. Right, because and Ralph, you mentioned Rocky Beach because we talked about the Rocky Beach, phone and such like that.
Oh, there's a phone also at Sandy Beach.
Rocky, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're both places.
Well, the other thing that they mentioned is that this has been, and I remember Ron mentioned it, and the Chief mentioned it, that they've been looking to kind of expand the fiber network, but that would be orders of magnitude more expensive than just putting an antenna on a pole, right? We see that with the DPW, where we're talking $20,000 to fix the fiber just to get back to DPW. So this also, to me, feels like if it's a network need, Chief is telling us it's an operational need, and this is going to be cheaper than us putting it up or us running wires to it.
Yeah, the only question I'm not going to talk anymore about it. Just the major question here is what, in addition to putting up a dish, or however it gets put up. And first, obviously, the question where, but the second one is, how can that be enough? Because you don't have microwave is line of sight. That's why they're dishes. That's why they focus the actual beam. So you're not accessing, when you're in a police car, you're not accessing that dish. You can't. It's impossible. So the other part of this question is, what else do you need in order to make this work? And that really means a broadcast network of some sort associated with that dish, and radios which access that broadcast network. So this is a not complete answer, as I can see right here. So 54,000 are two dishes, one on the top of Forest Ave and the other one at the Sandy Beach. But that's not the end of the story.
Michelle, do we have a good sense of how to package these up into answer questions to kind of get back
I'm communicating with Ron right now. As far as the Sandy Beach Association, he has promised them a rendering of what it would look like on the building. That hasn't happened yet.
Okay, can you ask him if, are there other functions of this tower outside of making that link? You know, if it, like, let's say we have some issue with the Sandy Beach side, is our presence on the tower, does that buy us anything? Because I think we all understand if we do it now, we save money in kind of getting on that tower. But to Ralph's point, if the tower's got nowhere to go, if we don't have a receiving side squared away, does it even matter? It's a long text.
Well, I also think, Ralph, not to sort of, Ralph, you're asking a fundamental question around what does a microwave antenna at Sandy really get us?
Yes, yeah, right, yeah, right. Because standing
and
alone,
asking if
standing
there
alone
was-
is not adequate, right, yeah, right,
And if there was this setup there, how would we be accessing it?
yeah. That's right.
Devices that we currently own, or do we have to acquire these devices? Those are really the questions.
Okay, so we will put this on revisit. And I'll put this on revisit as well. Okay. So let's jump down to police, where we've got $167,000. One's the taser lease, the 2 police cars, and then the mobile radios. Any outstanding questions with these? I don't have them. I'm ready to move, but as we've been doing,
I'm
defer to
good.
anyone who has problems.
So you're not gonna hear from me on that, okay.
All right, then I'll move that we move to recommend $20,235 for the second year of the 5-year taser program, $139,000 for the police car replacements, $8,300 for the mobile radios.
Ralph, second.
All right, we got it. Corey and Katie. Corey Evans, aye.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Katie Dugan, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
You can do the +1.
Franklin, I,
You jump Susan, Ralph.
sorry, I voted aye.
It's all right, doesn't matter.
It's a 5 plus 4 plus 1 plus 1 plus 0.
Mhm.
Okay. Recreation, we're good. If you don't mind, I will skip down to CEA if that's okay. Just because schools are all of this. So let's eat the small fish before the big fish. So since we do have enough money in the right now, I see no reason to delay the security cameras request. It's small and we can do it today. And I think Elder Affairs Director was pretty clear about the use case. The select board did have a discussion about security cameras and has a policy, so that kind of question mark was solved. So I would move for CEA that we approve $25,000 for the industrial commercial kitchen stove, as well as $12,000 for the exterior security cameras. I moved that. Not I would move, I did move. There we go. Make it more active.
Yeah, I would second that. I don't have any questions. I mean, Elder Affairs was quite, or was raising their hand to be a pilot for the cameras project. And as Corey said, it's $12,000. So I do second.
All right, Corey Evans, aye.
Katie Dugan, aye.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Mr. Franklin, I.
Maybe I'll abstain on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
So same thing with library. So we heard the staff computers, again, it was clear they just can't be upgraded to the new version of Windows, and they're already, 8 years old or whatever they were. We do have the request for the townwide project. We did put that on ice until we heard from the select board, and we also didn't know how much money we had. So this request for the this is a double request for both the library and for rec. They obviously have a parking lot and they have kids and all this sort of things. So this is one that I'm comfortable with both of these things. But if we feel like we need follow-ups on Paul Pratt or rec, because it is a larger ask than the other ones, I'm kind of okay with that too. But I don't have any further questions on either of these.
I don't have any questions on the stove.
Not stove.
The cameras, I was
Computers.
just, oh, sorry, the computer, sorry. I was just going back and trying to see the number of cameras that was being requested.
I think it's 2 at rec, and let's see here. I got the quote right here. It is 7 cameras total, I believe. No, it's 7 cameras total. Yep.
So,
7, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's one on every corner, one on each side of the library, and then a few more on. Well, we really don't want to get into it, but I do know that there was the library request and then the rec request, and they got merged into 2 because rec obviously has more focused needs than just kind of watching the asset.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to do it just given the amount of use that building gets during the summer, with honestly our littlest kids. I mean,
Okay, then-
that's where the High Five group is based out of in the summer.
Correct. Yeah. All right. So
Which I
move
know
that-
is horrible name, but it's called the High Five.
then I will move that we give a high five to this request for $29,734 for the 7 cameras at Paul Pratt and the rec center, as well as $12,711 for the staff computers.
Oh, I'll second.
roll call.
Corey Evans, aye.
Chris Feisch, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye. Katie,
Katie Dugan, aye.
Ralph,
No, mine is a no, and it's specific to the camera project. It is not, in my view, in the town's interest to start this amount of surveillance, and never has been justified. So you can just put no down for the 129,734. I can see that maybe the Elder Affairs might in fact have some justification marginally, very marginally, but definitely not at the library. That is not justified. And also very, very serious implications for what we're actually doing to the town and surveilling everybody on every street corner seems a bit much. So.
Okay. Now we try to bite off the schools. We have updates on this. Katie, do you want to spearhead the athletics transportation updates?
Sure. I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna actually start at the bottom.
Sure, wherever you want. Okay,
The Pond Street sidewalks, I mean, that $75,000 is a placeholder. We were still waiting to hear back from Brian Joyce, about the input that Concom gave. So the original project request was $50,000. After listening to Concom, we kind of bumped it up to $75,000, but we still don't know what the actual price of the project is going to be, given the handful of conditions that were added based on being in the 50-foot buffer and their inclination to do some additional conditioning. of the project. So that number is a placeholder. When Corey read out the number of like the little over $2 million, that $75,000 was coming out of the capital stabilization. The other conversation that we need to have once we get the real number is from a precedent standpoint, do we want to take a road and sidewalks project back into capital stabilization, or do we want to split it 50-50 with the schools and say 50% can come from capital and just as a good faith, 50% come from school stabilization, or ask them to take all of the project from school stabilization? The funding source, we need to flush out. We don't have the final number, but I do think the funding source is a conversation that we should have as a committee. So I'll pause there. Do people understand what I'm saying about the funding source? I feel a little bit strange about not starting a precedent of this being a shared expense between the schools and capital around this particular set of upgrades.
I'm not too worried about that concept. For one, it's the same pot of money, right? We do have carve outs, but ultimately it's tax dollars that people are paying. And as we've said before, this school stabilization fund, we're kind of playing defense on to be sure that it's available for the big projects. And if we have room, like again, for like 64 to 66, where there's, this is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more than $1 million of stuff. We can't absorb that in capital. So we just won't. If it's going to get done, it needs to be a combination of probably all three funds to really ever help, hope of having enough money. In this budget cycle, in order to do this out of this capital stabilization fund, we don't have to make any sacrifices. So I don't really have an issue this time around just saying we could fit it in this time, but only this thing. And, our goal is to spend the money we have because taxpayer dollars. Our goal is to, as best as we possibly can, choose the project to spend it on. And in this case, I don't think we're running a risk of setting a precedent or stepping on any toes by just funding it out of our things and out of our bucket. If it was priority 1A and we didn't have enough money or we had to bump something else, I would say differently. But in this case, we have the money and it's a good time to do it. So that's kind of where I land. If it gets to $250,000, then no, obviously. But if it's still, if we can still bite it off, then I see no reason why we wouldn't do it.
Okay.
So that was going to be my question. The 75 is just a placeholder. I mean, at what point do they get a final number after annual town meeting? So we won't even know, and then they'll have to come back at special town meeting for the difference?
No, I think the answer is like Brian can get us a better number now. He was just on vacation last week, and so we didn't. I literally sent out another email to him again today saying we're voting next Monday on this. We need your number. So he has it's the sidewalk length is like super containable. It's just a question of like Concom wanted it to be 6 feet instead of 4 feet, and they wanted it to be permeable versus impermeable. Those are things that he can crank out in an Excel spreadsheet. Plus he can add in some costs for rewilding 100 square feet. Like I think it's a number that is knowable within the next 7 days.
Yeah. And as Katie said, Concom is going to
wait for the answer. From
yeah,
Brian.
correct. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
overall on all those requests that are highlighted right now, the use of our schools goes beyond our school students. With all the athletics and things that we do at our school, I would like to think that at some point our roads stabilization fund will be able to begin addressing these areas that are, general use.
I think I agreed, but I think that's going to take some policy and some pushing, because right now that's not where that committee's mindset is. But to your point, like if there is a big number that comes back and it's a conversation piece, I do think that the Deer Hill Osgood campus could be a very big number that will require school stabilization, capital stabilization, and roads and sidewalks to accomplish it. And that's maybe an example of one where all three have to bite it off.
Right.
But I mean,
Okay.
their quote unquote policy, and I say that in quotes because I don't think it's written down, but it's been discussed by the sidewalk committee, is that they are currently not envisioning funding school property upgrades or repairs, but that's just, again, that one committee's opinion. That's not quote unquote town policy. And to your point, Susan, they're used by everyone.
Well, yeah, and the sidewalk committee is to give their role is to take some load off the select board, right? The select board used to be DPW and select board that kind of got the slate together, and now we've got a committee who's willing to spend time and effort to kind of go through the things and figure out what we can do. But it is ultimately the select board's decision what to put in front of the town, and then obviously we get recommendations. But the sidewalk committee, their job is to just take the load off the select board. They don't have any authority over this stuff by themselves.
Okay. All right. So,
All right.
so the update on that is pricing TBD in the next 7 days. Michelle, you can help me shake Brian on this one. I assume he's back, correct?
He is back. He came back last Friday, I believe.
Okay. All right. Well, then me hitting him at 5 o'clock on Monday was just piling on onto his inbox. The other update, pricing wise, I'm gonna go back up to the top, and the additional bus lease for 20,650. This pricing, I think we just need to double check the pricing one last time. In that, what Sue provided us was pricing for predicating on a 5-year lease for an additional diesel bus to address the incremental core route. But we haven't seen a formal quote behind that. And
It's
I guess
also from 2024. Yeah, that quote she gave us too. So
well, it's from September. So Susan, this is the question I posed to you late this afternoon, which is there's 2 years remaining on our 8 bus fleet.
Mhm.
We had asked them to make sure that the 9th bus basically would get
Terminus, right?
be coterminous next time. But what Sue came back and said is basically like, we're gonna enter into a 5-year lease for the new additional bus, and then they would wrap that into the new 8-year lease when we do that for fiscal 2028. But I don't quite understand mechanically how that happens.
Well, it can mechanically happen, but it has to be spelled out now. Like,
Okay.
you can't just like sign the separate lease for the one bus and just hope that they, in 2027 are like, yeah, that's fine, go ahead and move it over there. Like, we should kind of know how that works.
yeah, and we haven't received any piece of document that says this is for a 2-year or 1-year lease. Like all we have is kind of the email with handwritten notes that this is what the price is for 5-year lease. But I think one thing through this process at a macro level, one thing that I think I think what Ralph did with the Chief Dockeray was a perfect example of ensuring that we have the actual documents of what we're approving to back up the pricing before we jump into stuff, right? So what ambulance we're buying, but also if we're going to do a lease, we need to see the lease proposal in writing, not just a forwarded email.
Yeah, and normally what happens with a circumstance like this is, the payback that the leasing company anticipates, that they're gonna guarantee that they get that payback when they move that to the new
Right.
document. So
Right.
it shouldn't change our overall cost
Right.
of the lease, but it'd be great to see it in writing that is
Yeah.
what we're gonna do.
Okay.
Great.
All right. So I don't think the 20,650 is necessarily gonna move significantly or move at all. It's, to Corey's point, it's more about the getting in writing the mechanics of what we want to have happen, which is having the additional bus be coterminous with the next 8-year or 8 bus fleet. So getting that in writing. So that's a follow-up. So I would recommend us holding on this for this week until we can just button up and get in writing from DeVivo exactly what we want to have in that that new lease that we're talking about.
And that tees into line 51. Do you want to give an update on that one since we're kind of there right now, Katie? Because we're not year 3 of 3, we've learned.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I was looking at 2 documents and one suggested that it was ending in FY26. The other, which Susan dug out from the schools, clearly shows that the lease is ending. So we're in year 3 of 4.
Of 4, not 5. Okay.
Correct.
Because it ends June 1st of 2026. That's FY27, right?
No, it says the lease expires on June 30th, 2027.
Yeah, June 30th, 2027.
So we would be allocating for the period between June 30th, 26 and 27. I just want to make sure that this has nothing to do with what we thought DATCO was paying for.
Good point.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not following the conversation.
Yeah, they told us in response to our last group of questions that the residual position was going to get picked up by the dealer.
Correct.
And now suddenly the lease is a year longer. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't mean that DATCO picking up the residual isn't happening.
No, I think it was my mistake, not their, not.
No, I mean, it's not just you. I mean, I've understood this, that one sheet we had that had FY 24, 5, 6 or 25, 6, 7 written on it. That was always kind of my understanding. So I always thought FY 26 was the end of this cycle of lease.
In that, and so the handwritten notes are on a quote. What we got,
Correct.
what we got was the vehicle purchase agreement, which was dated July 14th, 2023, and terminates on June 30th, 2027. So that's a 4-year agreement.
Yeah, it's 4 years. It says it's 48 months in the contract.
Yeah, it's 4 years. So it's 4 years. So 23 to 24 is year 1. 24 to 25, which is where we are now, is year 2. Year 3 is 25 to 26, and year 4 is 26 to 27. So I think the only thing that needs to be changed, Corey, is just in our tracking spreadsheet that just reads year 3 of 4, like you just changed it to.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's the mistake. It doesn't change any of the other information. And again, relying on Sue's handwritten notes on a document is
My mistake. Yes.
what is it? Like,
Yeah.
we need the detail, which we finally dug out in the underlying
Okay.
purchase agreement. So I think
Yeah.
we're good there.
I want to highlight that because we were talking about doing a 1-year lease for the additional lease, but that would only get us, that wouldn't get us to the end of the cycle. So we really need a 2-year lease. Yeah.
We need a 2-year lease, or we need a 5-year lease. It's going to be picked up in the, anyway.
Right. Into a 3. Right. Yep. Gotcha.
The electric
Okay.
bus lease, year 3 of 3 is not correct in what we've got there.
That's year 3. Yeah, that's not correct at all. No.
Mhm.
We are, because we're like year 2.5 of 5, right? That technically speaking.
So we entered into it, I'm looking at the E-bus service agreement. We entered into it on May 2023, and it's
Yeah.
5 years, so it would be, it'd be, call it.
But we didn't get the bus until like September of that year, right? That was or even,
But just setting aside the signed agreement,
sorry.
the signed agreement is a 5-year agreement from May of 2023.
Yeah.
So that makes it
Right,
May
but-
of 2028.
But the signed agreement, you're talking about the service agreement, that's sort of the master overlying terms and conditions, but then when the term of the lease usually starts on the acceptance of the equipment. So that didn't happen at the signing of the lease.
Okay,
Yeah, but we
There's no
also fixed
schedule-
that.
There's no schedule or anything that says when it was initially accepted. but-
accepted. But Corey, your
Mhm.
recollection is that it was accepted.
Well, yeah, so we underfunded for FY25. We didn't do the full lease. We did we did like $9,000 because we had funded it in FY24 for the full amount, but we didn't receive it until like the spring or something like that. When did we receive?
Right.
Yeah, I think we received in the spring of last year. So we only were on the hook for $9,000 of that fiscal year lease. So what we did for last year was just top off the missing piece to complete FY25. So now we are in year 3-ish of 5.
So at the end of the lease, well, okay, so basically we did a stub period in the
Right.
first fiscal year. Will we have another stub period on the back end of this lease?
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because
Fine.
year 5 should be, whatever that is, $15,000 or the inverse of whatever that is. So because we won't get a full 5th year out of it, right? We'll have to give it up before the end of the fiscal year. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
So we think the equipment arrived in the spring of 2024.
Let me can pull that up easily.
I think what we were waiting on, I think we received the bus, what we were waiting on was the charging station.
Wow.
And
Okay.
until we had the full package, it wasn't,
So it wasn't
Operational
and
operational without the
acceptance.
charger.
We couldn't charge it.
It was April of 2024 was when we had that kind of thing, when it was put in use and we started using the bus. April 26, 2024. So
Okay.
So it's hard to say, we're not really in a full year of anything because we had a stub year, but whatever, over the course of time, it will be 5 years in total.
Yes, but
Correct.
the 25,000 still stands, as the request for a full lease year.
Mhm.
We
Right.
do
Correct.
have a maintenance provider, who is servicing the bus. It is operational. It's not without some hiccups, but it is serving as a core route bus. The underlying lessor is bankrupt. Nobody's picked up the contract, but we continue to appropriate, even if we haven't paid out of the appropriation account any of the funds to date because of the bankruptcy on the lessor's side.
Really? That's interesting.
Yes.
yeah, so we're funding a lease that we're not paying.
Right.
We're funding, but we're funding in, but
Well,
it's not
yeah.
going out, but we also can't not have money
Can't
there.
not
So,
have the monies, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
if
yeah.
somebody finally shows up and claims the lease.
Mhm.
But I mean, the bus is being used, the bus is functional, it's not. The other thing we heard from the schools is that, come when this electric bus pilot lease is done, they're not gonna ask for another electric unless something changes significantly. This will roll into a future diesel lease.
Okay.
All right, so let me move these two. So I move that we recommend 151,300 for year 3 of 4 of the 8 diesel buses and $25,000 for this section of the 5-year electric bus lease.
I will second.
Can I quickly raise the question of why we're going from 90,000 to 151,300?
Yeah, we went
Very
through
good
that
question.
offer. Turns out we were never fully covering the lease payments in the first couple of years.
What was the original rationale? Do you remember,
Yep.
Susan?
The original rationale, and I think Corey, you went through this in one of our meetings, was they were there's a section of the payment that had to do with not having the cost of maintenance that they previously had, and that was being deducted from the total. We were just paying for the what was considered at that time the comparative equipment cost of having a bus. But what we've come to, now realize is that process doesn't really work anymore going forward, because we don't have the cost of maintaining the buses like we used to have. We're not carrying that on our books anymore.
Yeah, the cost of maintenance was enormous. Like it was really way too high because of the age of the fleet.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so we over deducted what the capital contribution for what a new bus would be. And then the other thing that we did, I don't know if Ralph, you were in the meeting, was we kind of went through the mental exercise of, okay, if we were to buy these buses at $130,000 a piece, and we're presuming an 8 to 10 year lifespan, plus the maintenance costs, whatever those were, we'd be at the same spot, except that we'd have to carry a whole lot of debt up front. So we kind of went through even the capital exercise of if we owned these assets, what would it look like? And in this way, we kind of came to the conclusion that leasing is still more efficient for our capital use funds. And if that's our opinion, then we'd want to take up a larger portion of the lease because we were underfunding the lease payment.
Okay, thank you.
So Corey Evans, aye on that.
Katie Dugan, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Chris, are you there?
No.
Susan Franklin, aye. Did we lose Chris?
We lost Chris.
Oh, Chris, there he is. He's back.
Chris. Vote on bus lease for 151,300 and vote on electric bus for 25,000. Aye.
But first, unmute.
Yes.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, so-
I'm an aye on the last two.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Then I'm going to, Katie, do you want to address this one, or do you want to jump through these other line items first?
Let's go through the other line items, and I will come back to the athletic vans. So the request for the projectors is we've replaced projectors at the middle high school. We are now circling back to Osgood and Deer Hill. The proposal from the schools is to replace 13 at Osgood and 13 at Deer Hill this fiscal year for a total of 117,628, with a recurring request for next year for the other half at Deer Hill and Osgood. And then we'll have replaced all the projectors at all the schools, and this reoccurring request can move on into to other IT. And then the furniture replacement, again, another reoccurring request. We had done several years at Deer Hill and managed to complete updates to all of the classrooms. The schools had identified some specific conference rooms and counseling offices at the high school as the next update. Previously, they had been spending about $35,000 a year, so the two requests for the Babane conference room and the middle school counseling offices were $35,672, and would anticipate, again, them continuing this process with priority areas at Osgood or at the middle high school as they see them. And then the last request that we've heard, I think we've heard in full, is the request for the auditory and visual upgrades at the Deer Hill Osgood campuses, along with cameras at Deer Hill and upgrades to I believe it's, I forget, literally had this in my head, 19 at the middle high school. Let me just go back and double check that.
13 and 13. Yeah, I think they split it up evenly.
And that combined request was for those three line items that I had highlighted in red was for a total of 97,582.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you jumped to security cameras. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Jump to security cameras. No, the interactive whiteboards was 13.
My apologies. I lost track of where you were.
Sorry.
I was reading the note on the whiteboard about the sizes, and my apologies. I got distracted.
I'm sorry, it's 12 at so there were 29 cameras that they had in total that they were looking to update at the middle high school, and they're prioritizing 12 for this fiscal cycle. And then they're prioritizing another 12 at Deer Hill. So there were going to be 24 cameras in total between line items 62 and 63. And then line item 61 was just for the public announcement repairs at Deer Hill and Osgood. But the total request is for 97,582.
So Katie, are you saying that there are going to be additional cameras at these two schools? Because I thought on the request, they spelled out all 4 schools for a total of 181, where these 2 schools are in that total.
So there are 4 schools. The total is 50. The original request was for 52 cameras for 181,425.
Right.
They have prioritized 12 from Deer Hill, which was the total Deer Hill request for 41,850.
Osgood, yep.
For Deer Hill.
Deer Hill,
Osgood, they're deferring.
No,
Right.
it's funny, on their request, they have that flipped. They have Osgood at 41 and Deer Hill at 39, but whatever.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but that's the total amount for Osgood. You're saying it's 12 and that's all they need at Osgood, or there's going to be more for these schools later beyond the 181,000 in this list?
There's not going to be more than needed than the 181,425. That's the total.
All right.
Yeah. So for Deer Hill, it's the whole thing. For middle and high school, it's phase 1 of a few phases, but high priority ones. And then Osgood is only getting the PA system upgrades. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job on this. Yeah, I mean, we went through this one a bunch, and it was, obviously it went from a very large project to one was feasible, and I think that meets all the operational needs as well as our, what our capital budget can absorb in any one year.
But in terms of what you should expect to hear from in the future, you will hear Osgood come back.
Yeah.
And you will hear a second half conversation about the middle high school.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, this is going to take over the interactive presentation equipment kind of as a recurring project for 1 or 2 cycles. So,
and I guess from a warrant perspective, Michelle, my hope was that we can combine these. We've got them broken out distinctly here, but my hope was that we can combine it as update to visual and auditory security and combine it in one $97,582
I'll make the motion as such, that way in the minutes is reflected as such. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Okay. So I will make a motion that we approve $117,628 to do 13 for this phase of interactive displays, 26 in total, to be split between Osgood and Deer Hill. 35,000 672 for the annual contribution to furniture, for furniture as described here, as well as 97,582 for visual and auditory systems updates at the Cohasset schools.
I will second.
Corey Evans, aye.
Chris
Katie
Be-
Dugan, aye.
Chris Beich, aye.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Susan Franklin, I.
Okay. We will do it like that.
I should
is
be, I should be waiting for Rolf to vote. He's been pretty active here with good points.
Yeah, no, you could. Ralph is an associate member, so if we're only a 5-member committee, so if one of us is missing, Ralph it becomes the 5th. If we have 5, then Ralph is more of it's an advisory vote. Basically, it doesn't get recorded because we only have 5 votes to push to town meeting. So, but Ralph, do you want to give a +1 or a -1 on this stuff?
Yeah, I think on the schools, I'd do a +1. I don't know of anything here nothing that I can really say I would oppose. I think we're taking a pretty heavy load, I think, on the bus lease thing, but that was a previous vote.
Okay.
And most of the other things seem more or less okay. I do wonder about the number of cameras. We don't really have a good sense of that, but the one place I would have cameras is the schools, so I wouldn't object to that. And other than that, I guess you need to talk about the vans.
We do need to talk about the vans.
And that is the last time we will use the word van.
But before we get to that, Rolf, I think your points on surveillance generally are good. And that the committee should bear those issues in mind.
So the schools, so just to be clear, for the schools, these are replacing existing or upgrading existing. There's no additional surveillance being provided by the cameras that we've just discussed.
No, and I think that Rolf said he's okay on the school stuff, on
Yeah.
the school related.
Yeah.
And Chris, so the kind of the policy making board for the town is the select board, and they had a whole meeting about this. They took public comment, and they created a camera policy to address some of the concerns about what we do with the data, how long we keep it, who has access
Right.
to it, that sort of thing. And so from us on Capitol, it's kind of one of these things where if the policy making board is making the policy and it's filtered through those channels and it makes it to us, then where we're kind of deciding on the money expenditure, the policy side is kind of both in our lane but also not quite in our lane.
Okay.
So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. It hasn't been talked about. It's been talked about by the board higher than us.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah, so
those are all good points, Corey.
Yeah.
That's the context.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So apologies in advance, but the conversation about athletic vans has evolved literally in the last 24 to 72 hours. So we went back last week after we had heard them asking for the specs of the specific vehicle along with additional lease quotes, because obviously the one that had been provided was for a 5-year. So we asked for a suite of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year. What we received back at the end of last week were specs for a 14-passenger functional school activity bus. And it was a quote for a Chevy based product from 2 vendors, from DeVivo and from Anderson. DeVivo being the one that we currently work with on our diesel buses. When we saw the Anderson quote came in very high, it was almost like, we don't want your business pricing. I won't take it quite that far, but it was significantly higher than DeVivo. Both Corey and I were surprised about the terminology being used as a bus. Because up until this point, I think Francine, you had even asked this question, it's been described as a 15-passenger van.
Mhm.
And so we went back and said, please clarify, is this a bus or a van? You know, we had asked this specific question about 14 versus 15. You had said 15-passenger van. So long story short, superintendent and the business manager got on the phone, and there are federal regulations that no longer make vans possible. But there is a multifunctional school bus, which is what the superintendent was envisioning and had been what she had used when she was at Canton. The question became then, like, is this the right spec? Given the increase in pricing, we went back to them again, and today they came forward saying that they found a different spec for a Ford-based product, which is cheaper and exactly what they want. So that's where we stand. The pricing on the Ford-based product, which is a 14-passenger multi-functional school activity bus, the price for the vehicle on a purchase is $106,510. What was quoted to us from DeVivo is, you know, a 3-year lease at $22,000 and a 5-year lease at a little under $18,000. So it is a more expensive product than was being described in the athletic van conversation we were having. The superintendent further clarified with the athletic director that his coaches are willing and able to drive these multifunctional school activity buses. They do not require anything besides a Class D license along with a certification training video. So there's not any incremental licensure that's required. And they continue to state that the coaches are willing and able to drive the vans. Corey, what am I missing? I feel like my head's been sort of immersed in this conversation all day, and Michelle, you too. What have I?
Yeah. So I think where we're on this one is I got a lot of this came in on Friday, like even today at like 4:45. So where I am on this is there's still enough here that I don't want us to move it, and I'd like to kind of sit back down now that we've got all the other noise out of the way outside of a few things to follow up. I still would like us to take another crack at this thing kind of from the top with now that maybe I was missing it, but I absolutely was not envisioning what this was when we were talking about it before. And I've been through this in my head a few different ways, and I'm not quite sure what the best way forward is. So I'd like to kind of take another swing at it from step one and kind of say, you know, considering these are so expensive and that the other thing I learned is that these school activity buses are forbidden to be used for transport between home and school. So it's one of these things where we can only use it for one type of trip. It's only a certain size. It's also way more expensive than it should be. And if we look at what we're paying, it's kind of the same price as a whole nother school bus, which can fit a lot more people than we can use every day. So, but these are questions that I'm not sure. I'd like to talk with the schools more. I know that they're really busy, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but I don't think right now that the two of these, I can't vote either way on two of these the way it is without more time.
And just to
I
add a
agree
little
with you,
more color. I'm sorry, Susan.
Well, I just want to make one point on these two quotes, just so you guys know. The reason the Anderson quote is higher is because it's a full payout lease. Basically, at the end of it, you own this vehicle. And the other
Oh, I
one,
didn't catch that.
the other
Okay.
one is a fair market value lease. that you have to give back, and then, you know, they're taking the residual position subject to condition and all that kind of stuff that you agree to return the bus in. That's why it's a very big difference in price.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
If it's a lease, and Michelle, maybe you can answer this. If it's a lease where we're going to buy it at the end, why would we not just issue a bond and get a better lease rate, get a better finance rate for ourselves, and just buy the van? I mean, if we're a corporation, we can write it down, but we're a municipality, so we don't care about that.
So the one thing about a municipal lease, like the Anderson one, it's subject to, you know, the municipality, each year,
The appropriation.
appropriating the funds for the lease. So if you don't appropriate them, you can basically walk away from the lease.
Oh, so we have an out. So that was one question I had, is if we did a 5-year lease, but we said this isn't working, do we have the option to not continue with it?
We do.
Yes, technically, that's what a municipal lease is. I don't know if
I didn't know that.
it has any constraints on in what circumstances you cannot walk away. But usually municipal lease is just based on whether or not you have the ability to appropriate the funds.
So there'd be no reason to lease for a short amount of time then, really,
Not
unless,
really.
Okay, this is new
Yeah,
information.
because the rate's 7.25% no matter what. That's fixed throughout the pricing. On Anderson.
If I remember correctly, Susan, I think there are some restrictions.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, but if
Yeah.
you don't have a contract, you don't know what they are.
Exactly. Because this is all sort of ringing some like way back bells
Mhm.
about this from our,
Faint wind chimes down the hall.
Yeah, from
Yeah,
when we
that's
did
what
the
they're
computers way long ago. which
yeah.
Oh,
we do
okay.
on full payout municipal leases at the time.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It was like, I feel like we went round and round digital learning on this one.
Mhm.
Okay,
And then just to add a little more color regarding the pricing, so they have 2 buses that they'd like to surplus. They could potentially trade in one of those buses to lower that payment significantly, and we just don't have enough details about what they're surplusing to know if there'd be significant cost savings here.
so were you able to catch up with Ray about the surplusing of the wheel?
He hasn't responded yet.
All right, so yet another question to have for next week.
Yep.
And, for this one.
Can I just clarify, is this still is this one activity bus or 2 activity buses they're asking for? A
So-
14 passenger?
So the pricing is for 1.
Yes.
The request from the schools is for 2.
This pricing is for 2.
Yeah, the pricing, the spread, don't.
This is wrong, right?
Right, I'm ignoring that. I'm just trying to find out what the ask is, because, okay.
So the ask is for 2.
Mhm.
The pricing is for 1.
Okay.
So, double, so if we were to.
Yeah, I
fully-
got this right
If
here.
we were to
It's
fully
s-
fund with the request, it would be 2x what you see in DeVivo or 2x what you see in the Anderson Ford quote.
Yeah.
I am
17,000 per van.
like Corey at this point where two vans isn't making sense to me because we
Mhm.
buy or we can lease a 67 passenger diesel and
Mhm.
have redundancy for athletics and redundancy for our core routes, where we only have one backup bus in our current scenario. And it's an electric, so.
Won't the response be, though, that they don't have enough bus drivers, whereas the vans, coaches can drive them?
Kind of, sort of. So it sort of depends year to year. Right now, the schools and just the schools have 11 bus drivers under contract. They're paying 11 bus driver salaries. They have, because of the deficit this year, they
Mhm.
have, they've been able to outsource 2 of those bus drivers, so they're down to 9 bus drivers for 8 core routes. So they have more bus drivers currently than they need, which is a good thing, because if you go back 3 years ago, they didn't have enough. So yes, you're right. Depending on where they ebb and flow with bus drivers, having more buses creates that conundrum. The other thing about the athletic, the other thing about the athletic buses is that it is, because they are requesting the coaches to do the transportation, it's operational savings for them. They're not gonna have to incur a bus driver expense.
Mhm.
It's a Cohasset bus driver or a bus driver that they're renting along with a bus through a third party. So there's operational savings.
Mhm.
And there's probably a little more flexibility if they actually had, say, 4 or 5 athletic events on the same day, to have 2 buses,
Correct. I mean,
Maybe.
maybe, yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the question is,
Of
well-
like what teams have to travel, but you're right. Sometimes having 2 vans would let them split in 2 different directions.
Mhm.
But if they needed to get one big team someplace, you're now spending, in this scenario, 2 times $22,000 to get one big team someplace, versus a $20,000 a year bus lease.
Right.
That same team. So like, you're right. This is.
yeah. Yeah, correct. And if there's some instances where we've got one team which is 15 kids and another team which is 8 kids, how does that kind of get split up, right? So that's why we kind of brought up the idea of, if there's a full bus, you can kind of do both. So one thing I'm going to do is go through the list and try to say, okay, how many use cases were we double using the vans? Because then it's more efficient for us to just buy a bus. If you just look at the numbers, we're spending, if one van is 17 grand, but 2 of them is $38,000. We're using $38,000 of equipment to do what a $20,000 lease bus could do. So it's just that math isn't good math.
Right. Okay, I
Um,
think we have a little more work to do that, for sure.
we have a little bit more work to do. On the whole conversation around surplusing, we knew that they were surplusing the Bluebird, like that 2001, go with God, like get $10,000 somewhere for that, send it to Costa Rica. The surprise, and this is what Michelle needs to confirm, is the surplusing of the wheelchair van, because that was a special town meeting 2019 purchase for $55,000. And that piece of equipment is less than 5 years old, if it's the piece of equipment we're thinking of. So that was just sort of another curveball that was thrown in today of like, well, if you're surplusing a less than 5-year-old piece of equipment that we purchased for $55,000, that's a big chunk of change. And B, what happened to the use case for that wheelchair van, that it's evaporated in under 5 years. So that's the other. So there may be some money that's available if it's truly that piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do people, I guess Corey and I have been going round and round on this as sort of the school liaisons, but you guys have been sort of listening to it cold. I guess I'm sort of throwing out the question of like, where are your heads at right now in terms of the need and the use case as you think about the athletic buses or athletic transportation?
Well, from my perspective, I appreciated the materials that they provided, but deep inside, I'm a finance person, and it wasn't really a finance analysis as much as it was just sort of showing me demand, but it wasn't tying it to the numbers.
Yeah.
But I was willing to kind of like maybe consider, we talked about maybe one van or a pilot, but now the pricing is significantly higher. And lower in that one case scenario, but knowing that a fair market value lease has a higher risk profile, that's something you need to take into consideration too. So,
Okay.
And I,
Sorry, Francine, go ahead.
I'm curious now about, can we just get another bus and now that the numbers are getting more into that level of stratosphere.
And my thought is more on I'm trying to wrap my head around how a 14 passenger bus is really going to solve some of the constraints, because you look at some of these teams and they're large, they don't break it out by JV and JV and varsity, and maybe sometimes as a freshman team. And if they're going in a different direction, that might make sense. But even if you look at lacrosse and some of the if you break that down by the different teams, you've got a lot of equipment you've got to take with you too. And so for me, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around a 14 passenger bus is really going to solve the problem. That it goes back to your point, Katie, with the wheelchair for the elderly group, that I can't get my head around that makes sense, that it's really actually going to solve the problem.
I mean, I think in terms of the space, like one of the things that I do like about this multi-activity student bus, or whatever the heck we're calling it, there is space for equipment. So there's
Okay.
4 rows, 3.5 of which are used up with seating. So there's basically empty space at the back of the bus where you
Okay.
equipment.
Yeah.
So in the van scenario, Corey kept on asking, like, what happens to the golf clubs? Like,
Right.
golf club. So like there is space now for that. But it is 14 students plus a driver. So like that's the max that you can.
Mhm.
In terms of the use case, and this, Francine, this is what we did spend a little bit of time on last time. So there's 2 Excel spreadsheets that are in the OneDrive that lay out for fall and for spring sports, literally by trip.
Oh, okay.
You can actually see it breaks it down so that there's it's color coded. You're gonna love it. It's the yellow and the green, the blue and the pink and the green. You'll literally see that it's like we're talking about a use case for JV field hockey only, or varsity cross country, or JV golf. So
Right.
the team
Volleyball, right?
trying to solve for that are when you've got the full volleyball team or JV and varsity field hockey traveling together, that's bus only.
Mhm.
That's very clear
Correct.
in the data that was presented. So it kind of came down to that, like in the fall, there were 120 athletic trips that were done. 60% of those had to be done by buses, like no questions asked. There's another 40%, which was like a total of 52 trips that could have been addressed by vans potentially.
Okay.
And so they did get more granular. But to Corey's point, like sometimes you've got 3 events happen.
Correct.
And only 2 vans. And if we're only giving them 1 van, then you're back to, you're not solving all of the transportation needs.
Mhm.
Demand piece of it, I think, is there. I mean, that's to Susan's point. I think the demand is there.
Mhm.
Just matching the demand with the best use case in terms of equipment that we're still kind of going round and round on. Is the best use case 1 bus, because that gives us redundancy on core and gives us another piece of equipment to drive student athletes? Or is it 1 van that's a more cost efficient way to address the smaller teams?
Mhm. Okay.
That's
I'll go
my-
back on the folder and look.
Yeah, and shoot me a text or an email if you want. I can walk you through it more, but there is another layer of detail in there that they did give us. So,
Okay.
So I guess, in terms of follow-up, I mean, Corey and I will go back around the operational use case and what is the best match against the demand that they've shown us. We'll go back around the fair market value versus the full payout lease that Anderson, and then we obviously have to get to the bottom of the trade-in trade-in around the surplusing of the wheelchair, if that's actually happening, if there's any dollars there that are available for us to talk about repurposing towards transportation. But that's where we are with this particular request.
All right. Well, it's almost 9. I think we've accomplished quite a bit tonight.
Yep.
So that leaves just a couple of things for the next time that we get together. We had the fire engine. We had a question for the what's that piece of equipment called? The microwave communication upgrade.
The antenna. Yep. The
Antenna.
line of sight project. Yeah.
And then
LOS
we
project.
have
So we've got
have the
school
leases.
activity bus and Pond Street sidewalk too.
Right, and I think Brian just emailed us a second ago.
I have a call concerns. Okay.
Yeah, so he has a call tomorrow, so hopefully that'll
Okay.
Yep.
give us some
I
more.
knew he wasn't gonna
information.
like the permeable pavement.
I don't blame him.
It's a
All right.
budget.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right, then.
okay.
Nice work, everybody. We got yeah, mostly, I mean, we chewed through most of this, so
Yep.
we'll see you all next week. Do we have minutes to do?
We can.
And for next week, we are in person, correct?
Yes.
Are we back at Wolcott Common?
We will be.
And I'm water and sewer. Still no word from them. I know it's perfunctory for us to vote it, but
We're ready for him, so let's vote it. Right, let's
Michelle, do you mind reaching out to water and sewer and finding out their timeline?
Not a problem.
Thank you. So do we want to vote minutes? We've got actually 5 sets.
we do. Yep. So yeah, we can start on 1-6 is the first one, right?
Yep.
Yep, 1-6. This is when we did the police cruisers, the LOS.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any changes to this myself. So if anyone doesn't object, I move that we adopt or approve the January 6th, 2025 minutes.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chris Peisch, aye.
Okay, for these we can just do.
Francine, you there?
Francine,
I'm
if
here,
that-
aye, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know I was on mute.
That's okay.
Okay.
All right, the next thing is,
4-0.
go ahead. 5-0.
Well, Ralph hasn't voted, but yes. Oh, 5-0.
Oh, Ralph, yeah, correct. Yeah. And then we got January 13th. Everybody was there. Talked about the cap, library, fire lease, the fire department truck, discussion about just policy and stuff. So yeah, no changes on this for me. So I'll move that we approve the January 13th, 2025 minutes.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
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 We'll just do these quick and dirty stuff. All right, January 27th, we've got full 5-0, all 5 members, Elder Affairs, Library Facade, using the correct C, well done. My only my only edit is changing my name to Corey with an E in the minutes.
Okay.
At the bottom of it's I'm Corey Evans everywhere else except when I move stuff. I guess I have to move with my shorter name, my pseudonym. So
Okay.
with that small edit, I
Okay.
move that we approve them, the minutes of January 27th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Right.
Okay.
Now we've got February 3rd. These again by Leontina. Is there a big school meeting? Yep.
I don't have any
No
edits.
votes. Yep. Do you have any edits?
Nope.
All right. Move that we approve the February 3rd, 2025 minutes.
I'll
Second?
second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 aye,
Give the second to Susan that time around. I think you beat Katie by half a step there. And then just for variation's sake. All right, March 3rd. Yeah, just updates, and then we did movements again. Corey is missing an E on the motions, but Corey Evans is being Corey Evans the rest of the time. So with that edit, I move that we adopt March 3rd, 2025 minutes.
And there's a typo on the last paragraph of the first. It should be leave instead of lease the district.
Didn't catch that.
Yes.
Uh,
You add
Leaf
leave
is a
A,
word.
5.
Where is it? It's the I can't see it.
At, so under review and discuss school requests on the first page, last paragraph, it says the bus is used for core routes only and does not leave the district instead of lease the district.
Yeah.
I must be losing my mind. Where is, oh, there it is. Do not lease the district, not leave. All right, cool. All right, with those edits, I will move that we adopt the March 3rd, 2025 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
I was not there last week, so.
That's
Nope.
correct.
Yeah, so, and Ralph, if you'd like to, if Ralph is still there,
Take a 4-0 and call it our good work.
take a 4-0, doesn't really matter. All right, great.
Okay,
All right, I will get these edits, ones with edits over to Leontina, and then she'll get them over to the town clerk, and we will officially be up to date on our minutes. Yay
Woohoo.
us.
It's
Excellent.
dangerous thing.
It is dangerous.
all right. Okay, everybody.
I will make a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Say bye.
aye.
Say bye.
All
Thanks, everybody.
All
Good
right.
night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you,
On Monday in person.
good
Yep.
night.
All
All
right.
right, bye, Michelle.
Good night.
Bye.